Welcome to the audio commentary for T2X, Mission 8, The Art of Deception. Here, of course, we have another Hammer-themed cutscene as far as the artwork and everything. And this is the mission that, I remember particularly with the writing. It was a kind of a nightmare trying to figure out how all this was going to play out, because Zaya has to accomplish several things. She's going to set the smugglers up. She's got to plant this orb somewhere where it can be easily found by the Hammers, but overlooked by the smugglers. Where they're operating. She's got to let the Hammers know that it's there in a way that's convincing and believable to get them to take action. And at the same time, we haven't really let her explore the streets of Sunnyport as much as we would have liked, so this was a good opportunity to do that. And I love that picture of Cavador. This was one of the first pieces of artwork that came back, I think.
That was one of our concept pieces that we actually ended up converting to briefing art. And this is another last piece by Dan Staten here at the end.
Yeah. And but it was a little bit of a logistic nightmare, and I'm sure Raen will be able to speak more to how that was. Some of these obstacles were dealt with as far as the design of the mission itself. And I know plot wise, it was just we went over this mission a lot trying to figure out how to make all this plausible. And, did she need to do these things in a certain order? Did it matter? How much time did she have? Where was she going to put these things? What was the note to Cavador going to say that would convince him that he needed to go check out these caves and take action against the smugglers? There was just a lot going on. And, I often thought of this as being, what writers typically call the Rivendell scene, which is, of course, in the Tolkien book, Lord of the Rings, where the council comes together and you're introducing all these new characters and, new plot lines are coming in, and it's basically setting up for the second half of the game, which we're not doing so much here, but there was just so much going on that and it all needed to get good screen time, and it needed to be clear, and the readables needed to be clear, and we tried to do as best as we could to get all that across. But Duncan was really the guy that who designed this mission that really made all that work in the game world, and fleshed a lot of that out. So from
a mission design standpoint, this was really our big open Sunnyport map. This is where you got to see all the different pieces that you'd only glimpsed in other missions. This has got a little bit of the end of the train mission, Mission 4. This has got a very little bit of the smuggler caves. This has got a little bit of the cathedral, and a little bit of what you see in the following mission, in Mission 9. So, like we mentioned earlier, when Duncan went to build this map, he was basically building it. He was basically building the entire town with the idea that we'd be distributing large pieces of it into other maps. And in Dramed, that's actually an extremely painful process. It's not really an editor that's meant to import and export large pieces of geometry and actors between maps. So even though you might have the impression that we're saving time by having the similar geometry in different maps, it's actually more painful because of the way the editor works and how clunky it is. And just maintaining internal consistency between all those maps and making sure the geometry looks the same in all the maps, that was a real challenge to get that done.
Well, and one of the things that Duncan mentioned that was a real challenge was when you bring all that architecture across, the textures are all wrong, because it doesn't maintain the ID tags or something like that.
And when we say Dramed wasn't meant to do that, we really mean it. I mean, there's all kind of problems. Like everything just breaks. It assigns IDs to brushwork and actors and rooms and so forth, largely by number, and the numbers get screwed up when you import and export between different maps, so you end up with all kind of wonky side effects.
Well, and he said that he actually spent a lot of time taking screenshots of how it looked originally, and then opening up this mission and manually texture by texture, surface by surface, trying to make it match the screenshot as much as possible. And man, that you talk about tedious, time consuming
a lot of problems
work,
with that.
Man. That's a committed man, that Duncan. Yeah. But we didn't touch on it, but you didn't go here in the game, but there's actually an Easter egg a little Easter egg that Duncan put on the roof of that building where Zaya was staying. So
Yeah,
that's all I'll say. You have to go.
Because my playthrough's in hard, and he only opens it up on expert, but I actually went right to the area. But yeah, that's a little secret there.
Yeah.
A couple little secrets in this map that are real nice. This is actually one of my favorite areas of the map right here. I think is the market section here with
Very nice.
the different vendor stands. And, this is just really cool. You get to see the different Sunnyport AIs moving around. We had custom Sunnyport guards who are like City Watch guards. We had custom peasants to walk around Sunnyport. And this is where you first start to get a real feel for the town. And Duncan and I spent a lot of time talking about the differences that we wanted to have just architecturally and from a technical building standpoint between the Sunnyport and the city, because we both started working on these maps before we really had any textures or art resources for either one. And so just geometrically and spatially, they needed to feel different. And so what we wanted to do is for the city, we wanted to have everything feel very tall, very built up, very vertical. We wanted to have a lot of electric light, touristy. A lot of deep shadow.
Touristy, you know.
Well, Sunnyport needed to be touristy. It needed to be a little bit smaller scale. The roads needed to be less linear. There needed to be less alleyways. We needed to rely a lot more on natural lighting, like torchlight on the exteriors. And we wanted to give it kind of a rustic feel. And even before we had all the textures and so forth in place, I think Duncan's geometry did a good job speaking to that.
Definitely. And, I say the plot team struggled a lot, with how this was going to play out, but it was really, again, Valletta teamed up with Duncan, and she really helped him figure out how this was going to work in the game. And there's some little in jokes of theirs in here. Do you ever go down in the sewer in this one? So okay, well, we may save that for there. But there's some kind of I don't know. The two of them they're like they have some kind of odd in jokes that they've put in here that only they would understand. It's still entertaining, but you'd have to ask them about that.
Yeah, I don't think it detracts at all.
No.
So I guess from right here we can say that the player has two real primary objectives. This is where we break our formula of having one primary objective per mission. We give you two. The first is to plant the piece of incriminating evidence inside the smuggler's candy shop. That's the orb. That's their front shop that you're first introduced to in Mission 4, Shadowing the Enemy, the train map. And then the other objective is to make it back into the Hammerite Cathedral and to plant a letter in there which will inform the Hammerites about this other incriminating evidence that you're going to plant. And it really doesn't matter what order you do them in. We considered briefly at one point in time forcing the player to go in a certain order, but we really wanted the map to be an open-ended map. Right. And when the map is open-ended, there's really no point in forcing the player to go from one place to another.
Yeah. And for anybody, the little song that the guard does there, which that's me doing the guard voice, but I actually have an album coming out.
Performances.
Yeah, I've got an album coming out with all my little songs. But it's actually, I don't know if anybody caught this, but it's actually a little bit of a takeoff on the Milli Vanilli song, "Girl, You Know It's True," which there's a lot of young pups playing this, which nobody recognizes or remembers. But I just try to think of the most ridiculous song that I could. I think there's like an MC Hammer song somewhere in there, but is just trying to come up with something to make the conversations memorable, and it's really hard to do that when you're competing with the original Thief games and some of the Benny conversations. So,
yeah, the Smuggler voices actually turned out pretty well, and they were they should be familiar. They're me and you and Lazarus. We're the three Smuggler guys. So,
yeah,
that's why they're.
I heard my
times.
voice doing a lot of the Smuggler Smuggler voices. Well, this room, I got to say this too about Valletta. There's a text in this room, one of these books up here. It's some letters, I think, that a sailor had written to, I guess, a girl that was interested in him, a fiance or something. And it's one of the most hysterical things I've ever read. So, I won't go into the details of it, but if you've not read the book in that room, of this guy talking about any port in a storm and some of these things. Do you remember that one I'm talking about?
I remember that one.
I laughed. Yeah. I just thought that was the most hysterical thing. That's just classic Valletta, to throw something in there like that you're, just reading along.
Kind of innuendo.
Yeah, it's kind of this boring little thief story. And then at the end, there's this zinger, that you're just like, oh, God. But she was just great at that kind of stuff. And that's one of my favorite in-game texts. I laugh every time I read it. And here's the candy store. What's the most ridiculous thing that you can use for a front for the smugglers? Well, a candy store, you know.
Yeah, this is our bizarre sense of humor here. And of course, we had a bunch of little custom candy objects that we made, just little candy canes and so forth, and the jars, gummy bears. And this is really a pretty tight space in there, a very, very tight gameplay space. But Duncan made pretty good use of it. And this is one of those other scenarios where we talked about using one guard to maximum effectiveness. Mm-hmm. There's only one smuggler guard in there.
And that guy's a pain.
Yeah,
man.
and that guy's a real pain. You got to really be careful not to get caught.
Yeah. And again, the plot team thought it would be really nice if all the candy canisters would open up and we could eat the individual candies out of there. But the design guys just,
I don't
for some reason, didn't want to get into that. So, you know. We tried just to make things as difficult for you guys as we possibly could.
Yeah, I remember. But anyway, this is one of those scenarios. Here, let me change tact here. This is where we're going back to the entrance to the smuggler caves where you were at the end of the train mission. This is where you follow the three smugglers after getting off the steam carriage and come back here and discover the caves. And so this is another instance where there's a little bit of a map that you've already seen back here, but it looks different now because all the snow's melted and now it's a different time of day and there's different AIs out here and different things to collect. So it's familiar but different. And actually this area here, we weren't sure if this idea would actually play through, but you can hear the sound of waves crashing in the background. And we didn't want to build like an actual shoreline, but we kind of wanted to communicate the idea that you're close to the coast. Right. And so it's mostly done with ambient sound effects here.
Yeah. Now, did we discuss the confusion arrows yet?
Not yet. We can discuss them pretty shortly here because I think I use them.
When you use it, okay. Yeah,
we'll wait coming up here. So. Yeah, this is another mission where we introduced another power-up. We tried to keep it pretty consistent and have one new inventory item per mission, and you know, sometimes it worked out, and sometimes we ended up with two or none.
Yeah. Well, and another thing is, you know, again, dealing with this issue of non-hostile AI. And this, I remember we went back and forth a lot about whether the guards should, you know, you've already enforced a curfew in Mission 3 in the city. You can't really enforce a curfew again. Would the guards attack her? If they don't, what's the threat? You know, what do you do to bring a threat to the player? And so there, you know, we tossed around a lot of ideas for that, and I think eventually, what did we do eventually? I guess he added.
Well, actually, eventually we added Hemrites to the street, and that was one thing that I was kind of concerned about because we have these smugglers here, which are not only hostile to you, but will fail the mission if they see you. Then we have the non-hostile Sunnyport civilians who will, you know, do nothing unless you attack them. And then on top of that, then we also have the hammers who are hostile to you, but will not fail your mission when they see you. And I was always really concerned about that. And we have
four different things going on there.
Yeah, and so I was always really concerned about that because we didn't have any clear feedback. You know, that it was going to be clear enough to the player, and the player was going to be, you know, be able to get all that. I don't think we would have been able to get away with it in a professional game. I mean, we got away with it here, you know, because we don't have to worry about it quite as much. But it's a very difficult problem when you have different factions, and all the factions respond to the player with different levels of hate, basically.
Well, and I think in the beginning it wasn't as much of a concern because we originally thought that this would be sectioned off, like the player would only be allowed into the Hammerite areas at first, and then when they completed that goal, then they would be allowed into the smuggler areas, and so it would be real obvious to the player. But when you open all that up and make it all available at the same time, that presents quite a problem as far as, you know, like say, communicating to the player who's safe and who's not to approach.
Yeah, and that's, again, another thing that will scare off casual users, I think, because it's something where you really have to pay attention to what your enemies look like and to what your experience has been with them in the past. Yeah.
But again, you hope that guys, you know, people that are used to playing Thief are a little more observant than the normal gamer, and you know, pay attention to those kind of things. I
think certainly Thief 1 and Thief 2 make a lot of demands on the player for those kinds of things and for figuring things out. So.
Right.
So yeah, so this is back. This is a new little explorable area. This is right in front of the steam carriage station. This building was not enterable in Mission 4 and Shadowing the Enemy, but it's enterable here now, and it's just a little reward for making your way back to this area.
Well, and there's also a text in here again. You know, I see, and we'll notice this in the next Undead mission too. The way that Toolhead is kind of distributed text throughout the mission, and I'm probably not giving him enough credit. for some of these, I just remember more specifically Valletta's stuff because we worked together a little bit more. But in that little room, it's not a big deal, but there's a little text in there, and it's a note from the woman that works there to someone else or something like that. But it just gives some character to. It's like it's not just a random office. It makes it a space where someone works and spends the majority of their day. And who is this person? I mean, it's not a big thing, but it's just a nice little touch again that was so common in the original Thief games that it's not plot. It's not necessary to the plot, but it breathes some life into what would be a real sterile little office otherwise. A generic office. There's something memorable about it now because that text is in there. And here's the goodie bag.
Yeah, this area I think was actually a little bit too tough. If we had to go back and change something here, I think it would have made this area a little bit less challenging because there's the 3 smugglers out front who have the conversation, and then those guys go on patrol, and then in addition to those guys, I think you have like 2 other smugglers that are in the area here, and that just makes for this huge number of guys who could potentially fail your mission right in this area. It just makes it very, very tough. And in fact, I'm about to get caught right here. So,
well, and if you try to go right through that passage right there, you can't go too far before running into some other AI. So it's
for the most,
you didn't do yourself a favor by putting the light out there. That's for sure.
Yeah, I know. I thought I was, and then I ended up messing it up. So.
Pain,
but at least,
pain, death.
One of the reasons I wanted to leave that in there, though, is so we could talk about what we did with failed objectives on the cases when they did happen. Because one of the other non-player friendly things from the original Thief games is that you didn't know when you failed an objective, the game would just kind of end like 5 seconds afterward, and we always thought that was really irritating. So for Thief 2X, we always made sure when you failed an objective that we played a sound effect and or a voiceover. And we had a message on screen that said you failed an objective, so there's no possible way that you could save after the fact or screw yourself or whatever.
Right. I think that was an improvement over the over the original. But and I remember also in the beta version, this was actually one of my favorite maps in beta because one of my favorite things to do, like a lot of people, is to try to get out to break the game. To try to get outside of the map using rooftops or objects or whatever and try to climb out. And I remember you could do that in a bunch of places at the beginning of this, and I don't know if you still can. I don't remember.
Yeah,
actually if those were fixed or not. But
yeah, you're one of those jerk players that tries to get out of the map.
Sorry, you hate guys like me.
That's right. No, I mean we actually did have problems with this map because. It is a little bit less vertical than the city map. Most of the buildings are 2 stories, and there's a lot of crates around and so forth. And we actually found in testing near the very end of development that you could go and break the map in a lot of places by crate stacking or what have you. And so Duncan's solution...
It was great.
Yeah. I mean, I entered a lot of bugs, and I wanted Duncan to put up a invisible collision or change the buildings or whatever to fix it. And at the end of the day, you said it's really almost impossible because we're right near the actor limit for Dramed. If you've never worked with the Dark Engine, which I assume most people haven't. There's a hard-coded actor limit, so you have a finite number of brushes and actors and objects in a room, or in a map, rather, and you absolutely cannot exceed that limit. It's around 7,000. And this map, because it had so many pieces of other different maps, was very, very close to that limit. In fact, most of the T2X missions were very close to that limit because of the density of detail that we put in. And so he said, basically, I can't do it. I can't solve every single scenario in this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the number of crates, and I'm going to make the few crates that I do have unfrobbable, which is unusable, you can't pick them up. And that was not my favorite solution. I really hate instances where there are exceptions to a rule. Players have expectations to be able to use certain items in the world, and that kind of frustrated me that you couldn't frob crates in this map. But it was a solution to make sure that people couldn't break it.
Right.
So I mean, reducing the number of crates and making the 3 or 4 or whatever in this map not usable. It wasn't the end of the world. I guess it worked well enough.
Mm-hmm. And he's from Australia, so what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But it's it's a nice variety of gameplay in this too. You get some inside, you get some outside. It's kind of the Sunnyport version of Mission 3 almost. Where you're roaming the streets and the rooftops and all that.
Yeah, we did want to have the occasional big open city mission where you did that. just as a little fictional aside, those are two homeless guys out there. We wanted to show that even though this is a touristy town, like not everything was all sunny and happy. That there was a lot of poverty here too.
Yeah. I think they're talking about eating burrick or something like that.
Yeah, they're talking about eating burrick, and also they make a little allusion to the Grand Hotel, to getting scraps of food from the Grand Hotel, which is a mission that you're going to play later on in T2X. So again, it's another thing that's internally consistent.
Yeah.
And,
we tried to throw those things in there anywhere that we could without without being just too heavy-handed about it, and so that it's obvious these people are living and working and functioning in the city, and it does have restaurants and hotels and all these kind of things, and
people from one town may have been to the city or a location in a different area.
Right. Yeah, and that was another thing too that I don't know that we paid enough attention to is or how important it really was, but trying to keep Sunnyport kind of linked to the city, in the mythology that the city we of course always think of that as being the central hub of this world, and I don't know that we really. Other than the thing of the city Hammerites asking for the Sunnyport guys to get them the orb, and Cavador feeling compelled to do that just because they maybe have authority over him or something. There really wasn't a lot of reference back to the city when we were in Sunnyport. And ultimately I don't think it was that big of a deal, but it may have been something we should have tried to link a little more strongly.
Yeah. I still felt the influence.
So much to deal with.
We talked a lot though about the nobles from the city coming to Sunnyport to vacation, and so you still get readables and so forth from them. Conversations like, here's an example right here. This is where a tourist from the city presumably comes in with her little kid, and they're talking to the Hammerite up by the cathedral, and they think he's just kind of a tourist attraction, and he gives them the third degree. Yeah. So this is kind of funny.
Yeah, and she does in this where she says something about a grown-up religious freak in pajamas or something like that.
Just a little bit of humor in there.
Yeah, and because everybody always makes jokes about them, especially the mechanists, but the Hammerites too. It looks like they're wearing fancy pajamas. So that was kind of a little jab at that, or reference.
Yeah, just being self-aware that the costumes are a little bit over the top, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, and of course, these folks go back to their little home and just try to add little moments like this to give some life to the city. And you have to do that. I think one of the things I've heard so many people say that one of the things that they knew right off the bat when they started playing the Dark Project that they made them know this was going to be a different kind of game as they walked by this guy in the street on their way to the sewer, and the guy says, "How's it going?" And you're just not used to AI, or you weren't at this point.
Yeah,
AI interacting in that way, and so we wanted to try to sprinkle things like that where there's stuff that's inconsequential to the plot going on. There's other things going on in the city. It's not all about Zaya and the
people react to you
and smugglers
and so forth. Yes, that makes me feel old because you're saying back before the turn of the century, before we had real AI in games, it was pretty cool to hear guys talk at you. That was the shit.
Yeah, it was.
So And so here we go. We're exploring back through Sunnyport here. That geometry where we just were should look a little bit familiar. That's the beginning of the cathedral map, A Question of Knowledge, and it's reused here for spatial consistency. And so if Duncan, or I should say if I kept playing through Duncan's map in that direction, I would have continued up to the cathedral, but I decided to go a different way, and this is kind of the special way.
The secret way.
Yes, indeed.
We'll have to kill you after you watch this.
So here's another instance of being able to use an ice arrow to get some resources.
Right.
This is another good setup by
another
Duncan
lure
here.
With the gas arrow.
Another
it's always with
the gas
arrows,
but and it's really simple. You don't have to use the ice arrows to do anything really complicated here. It's just another means to use them to achieve an end.
Yeah. I've died more times than anywhere else in this entire game. In beta testing, I don't know. I guess it was the patrol routes that the guys were taking. I could just never get the hang of getting through there. And I remember that was one of my suggestions with the beta test. Guys, this is a really tough section. Nobody else is having a problem with it, of course, because I suck at playing Thief. But I've seen my blood spilled so many times on that lawn right there in front of this.
That's funny.
In front of this water.
It's a case where I got stuck here, and now the platform breaks, and now I'm free again.
Yeah.
Little clunky collision. The physics stuff in Thief is is
especially
really a
with
can
water.
of worms. I mean, back in the day when Thief 1 was developed, the physics engine was actually really good because nobody had developed a game where you can have like a bunch of objects colliding and you can pick up stuff and throw it and so forth. And then in Thief 2, it didn't really need to be updated, but the problem was right after Thief 2 was released was when we started seeing Karma and Havoc and Ragdoll and some really interesting physics stuff. And then so by the time, we started to really get into T2X and get it ready for release, that, our physics was like so outdated and abysmally, I don't know, just esoteric at that point, I guess you could say.
No, that was that we just saw there, I think was Willie, the adventurer Willie.
Yeah, the Big Willie Adventure.
Big Willie the Adventurer. It's some kind of bizarre joke that
Duncan put in. Yeah,
and they won't tell us what it is really. I mean, it's just some secret thing between the two of them, and that's fine. But poor Big Willie, rotting away down there in the sewer. Maybe one day the story will be told.
Okay, so here's the first point where I use the confusion error. I actually probably should have used it earlier. But this was a new kind of clever emergent player tool that we came up with to make AIs hostile towards one another. And we had the AI systems in place, and there were no means by which you could force AIs to fight one another in the original Thief games. We thought it would be really cool to kind of let that play out. And again, it's not an all-powerful tool because no matter the outcome of the fight, you're always going to have at least one AI left to deal with. So it's not going to kill everybody, but it does make for some really interesting, really like funny combat scenarios. Yeah.
And one of the things that and I don't know whether this was intended or not, but I thought it was a nice little reminder of. System Shock 2, where you could either program the turrets to fight the enemies, or you had, I know there was a mod, player mod that you could use, with your SciAmp to cause the organic creatures to be hostile toward one another or something like that. But it was, which I don't know if that's what you guys had in mind at all, but it put me in mind of that, and I thought it was kind of a nice little.
Yeah, I mean, AIs fighting one another is always interesting, especially when you're in a scenario like this where you're dealing with primarily melee combat, because you rarely see that in the game.
Yeah. I was really disappointed that I could never lure that Burrick up into the hammer compound. I tried. He just wouldn't go up in there, because that would have been awesome.
Yeah, he could have logged that bug. Maybe we could have gotten it in. You can lure him, however, back to the Mechanist robot that was back in one of the other tunnels.
Fun.
And that's another cool fight to see a Burrick versus a robot. I didn't do it here because I didn't want a chance losing health playing through, but that's kind of a fun combat setup too. There's all kinds of crazy stuff you can do.
Yeah. Well, and everybody I think enjoyed once we kind of realized we could do it in the original in the Dark Project, the Haunted Cathedral mission, where you could get the zombies and the Burricks and the spiders all down there in this huge epic street fight. And again, we haven't really seen an opportunity like that, or didn't see an opportunity like that in Thief 2. So it was something that it had the potential to happen here in this mission.
Confusion arrows were interesting to implement. They were really pretty simple, but we had the hardest time in the world with the particles, because we tried a couple different effects on people, and nothing really read as being confused. Like, what kind of particles come out of your head to make you look confused, And so eventually we just ended up with a question mark, and even though that was very kind of gamey, it was the only thing that we found that really communicated the idea very clearly. One of the subtle things. One of the subtle things we did is I actually made angry skins for all the armed guards in the game that you could hit with a confusion arrow. So it's way too subtle for you to ever notice. But if you look at the faces of the guards, they're actually like red and angry when you hit them with the confusion arrow, and that was like a real pain to do. And when we implemented it, you can't even tell. Yeah. So we needed something obvious like the question mark.
Right. This was an enjoyable thing for me, was getting into the priest compound, because and we discussed this in the plot discussions, that the Hammerites, we always suspect them of being corrupt. We always, Garrett even makes the reference in Christcleft when he gets upstairs. He says, so this is how they spend all that tithe money. But it's really not that fancy. There's some gold candlesticks and stuff laying around. So we thought, this would be a great opportunity to show what's really going on with the Hammerite Order, and what this is really about is when you get in here to where the big wigs live and gather and do all their stuff.
Choir boy practices.
Yeah, choir boy, whatever it is they're doing. These guys are living in high style, as opposed to what we saw, down at the cathedral where, you've got the bunk beds and the wooden crates and the,
exactly.
That kind of stuff. It's like, this is a kind of an opportunity to show the Hammerites for what they really are, which is, obviously corrupt and power hungry and, all this stuff about poverty and sacrifice for the builders, just a bunch of hogwash really. And, so it was great. I don't know, I guess Duncan had fun kind of, putting all the bling in here, but we really in the plot documents I know said try to make this just almost like sickeningly rich and lavish in comparison to the way the acolytes live.
Yeah, and most of the geometry here was originally built by Robin G. This is when Duncan needed to take a break for university studies for a couple of months, and Robin G. built most of the geometry in here, and that was nice because he did a lot of geometry, well basically almost all the geometry for the cathedral, and so you can see that it's a similar kind of style. It feels like it belongs to the same place, but at the same time, he did different things with the look, and I think the texturing in here was, I think, a little bit of everybody. I think a little bit of Robin, a little bit of Duncan, a little bit of me. Well, actually, no, I didn't work on this. That's right. It was exclusively Robin and Duncan that did this particular area.
Now I remember though, before Duncan got hold of it, and I don't know if it's because we were working with old texture packs or what, but the texturing just looked really old and dank and everything. So
again,
when we got these new textures, and I remember going back in to retest it, and I was like, man, this looks fabulous now. I mean, this is what we envisioned just as being a really wealthy area here. Just
that actually I think was my main contribution to Mission 8 was retexturing it and putting in a little the pathway on the road everywhere. This is mostly Duncan. I think this map is like 90% Duncan and probably 8% Robin G and probably 2% me.
Yeah. A little more fiction there under the couch and on the bed. You get a little more insight into what's going on with Cavador and his struggle. Is he going to stay with the Hammerites? He's having these meetings with Karis, and this is really the last we hear of Cavador in the series. Of course, we know that he goes on to become a mechanist and be in charge of the Cetus Amicus project, but we really wanted to play that through and continue on kind of the subplot, his subplot from the other mission. And I think it worked pretty well. I mean, I don't think anybody was just horribly interested in who Cavador was, but that was one of the reasons, like I said before, that we were able to do what we wanted to with him.
He was a good pre-made character. So,
yeah. I got caught beta testing. This was a tough area to ghost.
This whole compound. I'm playing on hard right now in this playthrough, and if you play on expert, I just got caught right there. And if you play on expert, this place is just swarming with Hammerites. I think it's one of the most dense areas in the game, and I think it really is too dense, all things being considered. The reason that I don't think I ever logged more bugs or really requested more changes is just because Duncan was really so good about sprinkling resources throughout the map that you're really super powered at this point. It's a big map, and it's there's a lot of player tools and weapons everywhere, so by the time you get here, you should really have a lot of arrows. You should have a lot of ice arrows, a lot is confusion arrows, a lot of fire arrows. You should just be able to deal
battle
with it.
If you're up for it.
So if you do get caught, then all is not lost.
Yeah. Is this the guy with the spice addiction here?
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of nice.
Yeah.
Because again, you're seeing the Hammerites. It's not all that they, and we knew it. They're not all that they appear to be on the outside. But it was just kind of nice to have some confirmation of that with the wealth and the drug addiction and the backstabbing with Onum and Cavador and all that. We really felt like we're fairly confident that they weren't going to play a major role in Thief 3, and so it was okay to kind of show some of that here.
Yeah. And this is all really fun exploratory space here. This is just little individual priest rooms with, again, excessive amounts of wealth and lots of stuff for the player to steal.
Right. And you have to have that from time to time, just some good old-fashioned thieving where you're not too worried about trying to convey story and all that kind of stuff. And here's a guy that maybe has a drinking problem, with the wine bottle by the bed. So we try to just put
give
some
a little flavor here and
just
there
to kind of show, there's all is not as they would like everyone to think that it is, as far as their piousness and everything. And I liked this trying to get past these guys at the gate here, and it's a nice reveal. You come out into this courtyard and go, oh, that's where I was in Mission 6.
Yeah, looking back in the opposite direction. Again, a bunch of resources here for you to use to stock up, and a gatehouse with 2 guards in it, one looking out each window. This is a pretty good classic setup considering that there's only 2 stationary guards here, but again, they're used very effectively in a small amount of space.
Yeah.
And here I chose to use a gas arrow to take them out. Gas arrow is like the ultimate all-powerful knockout tool in Thief. It's like your best weapon.
Definitely.
And this the gate is you can't get by the gate on the other side in Mission 6 because it's locked, and this is where we find out why. It's just a simple lever mechanism that opens it, but now you can get out in the other direction, and you can go and see all this geometry that reminds you of Mission 6 right here.
Well, and it's locked from the outside for obvious reasons. These guys don't want the acolytes to know
exactly
what it
like
looks like and how
yeah.
good they're living while these guys are freezing their asses off in the dorm over here.
Just getting caught left and right here.
Yeah. Yeah, this is not Lithus style. Just in case anybody's wondering, if you ever wonder what Lithus style is, it's the opposite of the way that Dave is playing here. But
yes, I play like a real man. What can I say?
Yeah, you're not afeared. You'll fight them.
I'm not afeared.
And I loved this. I love, to me, it's kind of, you take a little damage, but it's like a desperate way to get out of there because you sure don't want to have to go back through all that mess to get out. So that was a nice little way to escape there.
Yeah, and got plenty of healing resources here. Right. And of course, in Mission 6, some of these buildings in the main cathedral are open, and we had to seal it off. So we just sealed it off with doors. You can't get in anywhere. Yeah.
I don't know if Strange Blue will watch this or not, but Duncan reminded me, of course, we're at the cathedral back in the, I meant to mention this earlier, back in the Market District. There's a Strange Blue dairy goods that you can find, and we wanted to make sure we got her name in there somewhere.
I think in Valletta's Green Grocer, too, in there. So
there's a couple of
people's names.
Like
yeah.
Which, some people complain about that, and they think that's cheesy or whatever, but we just had fun with it, and, it's a community project, and we just,
and plus we have
self-referencing, we just thought we were just that great that we could.
Yeah. Well, the problem is too, we have literally like hundreds of signs like throughout the game. If not more, and
you start getting real dry ideas.
Yeah. Here's another great case of using a confusion arrow. I didn't use this early in my playthrough. Maybe I should have, but the Sunnyport guards are originally non-hostile to you, so you can walk right by them. But you have these confusion arrows, which makes them these death machines where they can chop down the Hemrites. So they essentially become this kind of a human resource that you can use throughout the map. So whenever you see one, you can choose to make them hostile and make them attack the Hemrites nearby.
Right.
And it's kind of an interesting way to look at AI as a resource in the game that you can use to your own advantage.
Yeah, we try to, kind of be creative with stuff like that. Obviously, Looking Glass never intended that really, and it wasn't part of their story. It didn't lend itself to the story they were trying to tell. But I thought you guys did a great job with developing some things, like just finding ways to take what was already there and approach it from a different perspective and say, how could we use this differently than how it was intended? Or
after building a couple of fan missions, I think we were intimately familiar with all the different kinds of systems, all the scripting systems and the AI systems, and we tried to think about ways that we could make them interact so that we could create player tools that took advantage of them. And I'm really glad people seem to pick up on that. Like Gingerbread Man and his review, his official review, the first review that we got up on the Thief fan community boards, mentioned that there was a lot of emergent possibilities with the new player tools, and I'm glad somebody took note because that kind of gameplay is really difficult to come up with, and it's pretty fun. You can kind of create your own fun here.
Well, and I think the tendency for a lot of people, I know for me, just playing through even in beta testing, I had a tendency to fall back on the stuff that I already knew, rather than experimenting with the new stuff. But that's again, it helps with the replayability. Even just watching you play here, the way you're using some of these EMP grenades and stuff, I'm thinking I need to go back through and play this again, and use some stuff a little differently. You kind of fall into a rut in the way that you play, and providing the new weapons maybe encourages you to be a little more creative.
Yeah, and as you become more comfortable with them over time, then you might use them in different scenarios that you didn't think of before.
All right.
You can find different ways to use even the original Thief tools a lot.
Yeah, and right in the apartment off to the right over here, if I'm not mistaken, is Big Willie, the Adventure Willie's apartment somewhere over here.
It's up the stairs. I think I actually do go up here right now.
we don't really get the full story here. So again, the 25th year anniversary edition, maybe there'll be a Big Willie mission,
Big Willie special edition,
that will detail his life story. And
Big Willie the Adventurer. I think Duncan just likes saying Big Willie.
I think he does too. I suspected that, but I didn't want to be the first one to say it or to imply anything. You know?
So anyway, we're nearing the end of the map here. We pretty much explored everywhere. This is a huge, gigantic map. The last objective is to find your way back to the room at the inn, and we indicated that clearly on your player map. I was always kind of curious if that was the best place to go, because it's a little bit difficult to get to. But again, I think there's some clever gameplay and jumping up here and getting across.
It was really. I meant to say at the beginning, when you come out of that window, it's kind of a nice reveal too of what the mission's going to look like. So
yeah, this is a fun map.